Hello, eighth graders. So, as part of today's lesson, we're going to be going over how in the last few report cards, we have been giving you an inquiry formative grade. So, really practicing on that skill of students will develop claims with evidence that support their reasoning. And so, that has been where we've had our focus and feedback for the last couple of assessments. Now we're going to be doing the inquiry grade still, and also grading on this history skill. So you will have 2 assessment grades associated with this next report card that you will be taking in your next lesson, lesson 16, on either Wednesday or Thursday, depending on if you are a day 1 or a day 2. So your history skill that you are expected to work on is Wisconsin students will analyze, recognize, and evaluate patterns of continuity and change over time in contextualization of historical events. Now, what that means practically in our sense is that, so a minimal representation of that is that when you're giving your example or your evidence, you're only using one piece of evidence from that time period, only giving us one little itty bitty snapshot into your understanding of what's really going on at the time. For a basic, that's where you're starting to give multiple different examples for your multiple different phrases. Remember, you're assessing how well is this time period doing at accomplishing those preamble goals. And so thinking about that, you're thinking, okay, what are the variety of evidence and examples from that time period in order to assess how well is the country doing? Now, we do anticipate, and especially in a basic, that some evidence details may be slightly inaccurate. And that's really the difference between that basic and then proficient. So proficient is that variety of examples are used throughout the report card expectations. Examples used are accurate and create a context for the time period's demonstration of the preamble phrase. Now, one of the reasons that we have that, and that's the difference, is that remember that this is open notes. You should not have content mistakes in your report cards, because you should be using your notes and making sure that your notes are accurate and that you can look things up again and use that accurate information to the best of your ability. Similar to the inquiry grade that we looked at last week at the last lesson, that A is the variety of examples are used within the same preamble phrase response to demonstrate connections and relationships within and around the context of the early republic. So that's really creating a dynamic understanding of how that time period is doing at that preamble phrase by using the evidence and examples that we have in front of us and using those examples in their relationship to each other. So that's really what the rubric is. Now, let's look for a hot second at what is continuity and what is change. So continuity is very plainly the unbroken and consistent existence or operation of something over a period of time. So basically, continuity are things that stay the same, that are continual. The example of from Washington to Adams, that both wanted to and attempted to stay out of European conflict, that idea to stay neutral and how to make that happen and what evidence they had to suggest for that is a continuity between Washington to Adams. So that's a pattern that we can see of Washington set that precedent and it was continued to be followed. So that's where we're thinking of continuity are things that are the same, that we can see a pattern of sameness. Now on the flip side, we have change. Make or become different, take or use another instead of. So this would be the representation of what is something that was one way and is now another. So Washington, remember, he said, avoid political parties, do not have a political party. A change in history was Adams was a Federalist. He subscribed to Federalist policies and had a political party association. So in that way, that would be a pattern of change. So things that are different. So we have patterns of sameness and we have patterns of difference or change. Continuity and change. So that's where in this rubric, when we're looking at a variety of examples and especially thinking of the context, we are noting, okay, how is this doing in a way in relationship to how the country was doing before? So in order to get our brains kind of starting to practice this idea, in front of you are the example or evidence lists for Adams on the left and Jefferson on the right. So you've hopefully already read the context about Jefferson and you have Adams still in the back of your mind. You're now going to look at these evidence lists and create a Venn diagram for continuity and change, or rather, the aspects between Adams and Jefferson that were different, and also looking at the things that they maintained the same. Directions for this particular assignment are written out in the Canvas assignment as well as on the slides themselves. You'll notice that slide 4 is where you will be doing your work. However, we have the instructions, so using those evidence lists provided as well as your notes to list aspects that were different for each as well as aspects that were similar. And this is all working us towards recognizing those patterns of continuity or sameness and patterns of change or difference. We give you an example between Washington to Adams to see how can some of these things be written out. Then here are your lists on slide 3. And lastly, here is your blank slate for your work between Adams and Jefferson. Email any questions. You all are amazing. I will see you soon.